Okay,
What
can
would
you
you
guys see
pick?
my screen okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, hopefully we will rate with The Wizard of Oz and all of those great um, pieces of literature. We shall see. But for now, thanks again for having us. Again, my name is Karl Vilacoba, and Nick you met, who will speak in a little bit, but I'll get us kicked off. And in addition to my work on the portal, I am the communications director for the Monmouth University Urban Coast Institute, which is located in West Long Branch, New Jersey, right by the shore. So we are going to start by just giving a bit of background on the portal, how the project developed, and who is behind it. Then we'll jump into a tour of the site, its data and tools, and finally open it up to a Q&A that you can ask us anything that that you like. But I will mention, since we're a pretty small group here, no problem if you see anything that confuses you, that you have a question on the spot. I don't mind if you want to stop and ask that. We can keep this pretty informal. So when you guys go to Ocean City and you look out at the ocean, you see probably something like this as you're sitting in your chair, and you just go, this vast watery void where it's just so relaxing and nothing to see and nothing going on for miles and miles around. But the reality is the ocean is a very busy place, and especially here in the mid-Atlantic, where you've got many of the busiest ports in America, with Baltimore, Hampton Roads, New York and New Jersey, and several other, Philadelphia. You've got a thriving commercial fishing industry, lots of undersea telecom cables coming in and out. Now you've got offshore wind being developed for the first time, freestanding structures in the middle of the sea. And so what the portal does is help you visualize all of these things so that people who are in ocean management roles can make better informed decisions on them. So what is on the portal? Currently about 6,000 different maps organized under about a dozen themes, and you can access this. It's free and publicly accessible at portal.midatlanticocean.org. We have lots of tools for users to share their maps, save things they're working on, share them together in groups. And we have instructional and educational resources like a blog that can keep you updated on the latest data, an ocean stories piece, which I'll show you, a calendar of events and webinars. The team behind it, the portal team that you mentioned just before, is Monmouth University Urban Coast Institute, where I sit, Rutgers University, Duke University, the New York State Department of State, our kind of state member on the team, our developer EcoTrust out of Portland, Oregon, and we work under the guidance of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Ocean, or MARCO. And I will pass to Nick, actually, to talk a little bit about MARCO and about the portal as well.
Okay, thanks, Karl. Yeah, so Karl mentioned 6,000 data layers, and Karl is his background's in communications. My background is in land use planning. So neither of us is a marine biologist. Neither of us spends extensive amount of time on the water. We're not involved in the shipping business. I occasionally go recreationally fishing, but I wouldn't consider myself a fisherman. So what we do is, in order to inform ocean management decisions, we're basically trying to characterize everything that's going on out there. And there's a lot of data, but you'd have to be a data expert to find it all. And to put it all together and get a picture of what's going on takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of expertise that we don't necessarily have. And we wouldn't attempt to create a map about where humpback whales are without talking to the experts on humpback whales. So that's how we put the data together, and our team puts the data together. Is we're creating map layers, map or data products that are derived from a lot of data and we're talking to the experts in any topic to determine what kind of data should be pulled together into a map. And then we're having them review that map to make sure it characterizes that activity or that resource well. Likewise, in order to understand how you would use that information in different management or decision-making processes, we show the jurisdictional areas, we show the footprint of an agency action or a proposed project. So Karl brought up offshore wind. It's definitely a hot topic in the mid-Atlantic and throughout the Northeast, really along the Atlantic coast through South Carolina. And we will show the footprint of proposed projects. Every project that's being proposed out there has a map layer so that you can see what kind of shipping, fishing, marine life activity is going on in that area. And so the portal's used and Karl's going to show some examples by the agency decision makers, but it's also used by the various industries and members of the public who are interested in these topics and want to provide comment. You'll see our maps in a lot of public comment documents, as well as in a lot of agency documents. As I mentioned, tons of data. We're pulling together data from federal government sources, state government sources, tribal government sources, all of the research and academic institutions. I think we work with just about everyone that does marine research on the Atlantic coast from Maine through about North Carolina. And we do a lot of work with industry to bring in their data too, where it's appropriate to show where their activities are occurring. Next slide, please, Karl. So Marco gives us that forum to do that. Marco was established by the governors of the 5 mid-Atlantic states from New York through Virginia in 2009. And it was established to really address regional ocean issues. And Marco is not a formal regulatory body, does not make decisions. It's formed to create a voluntary forum to identify information needs such as data. This is probably the biggest thing we do, is provide data and information and map layers in context for those maps so that decisions can be made and people can participate in that process. The current chair actually is from Maryland right now. The chair rotates through the 5 states. Next slide, thanks. And Marco is one of 4 regional ocean partnerships. These exist in other parts of the country. I'm actually the executive director for the Northeast Regional Ocean Council. I live outside Boston, and I'm involved in Marco as well. And these exist throughout the country. We actually are authorized in federal legislation and funded through a variety of federal sources and state sources and industry sources and private sources, like Karl mentioned, including the infrastructure law. So we're funded to provide information for these different types of projects that are ongoing offshore. Next slide. And I don't know who's taking these, but I'm going to keep going until you tell me to stop. Do you want to go, or do you want me to keep going?
Sorry about that. Slideshow mode again. I can jump in if you like from here.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And you can pass it back at any time.
No
We've
problem.
done this presentation so many times, we pass back and forth.
And jump in if I leave something
for
very important out, which I'm sure I will.
Go
But
for
I
it.
think one of the things that the portal project has done that's been very important is bring a lot of that data that Nick talked about, that it was kind of located in 100 different government agencies and academic institutions and all over, and bring it under one umbrella, really specially curated to have the most important stuff to the 5 mid-Atlantic states and what they need. There is a federal level portal called the Marine Cadastre, and we ingest some very important baseline data sets, some national data that shows, for example, where all the shipping lanes are, or things like that. Um, and Nick is also part of the NROC project, which is essentially Marco's counterpart in New England, and we develop a whole lot of data together. A lot of our biggest data sets really make sense to pull together as a team because fish don't know where New England begins and the mid-Atlantic stops, and neither do the waters or oil spills or anything else that goes on at sea. There are some states that have their own portals, and we take some data from them that makes sense to round out what we have and supply a lot of them with it.
I don't even know where New England stops and the Mid Atlantic starts, and I work
Right.
across both regions. So
That's a
when
part
we're
of our
talking
advanced hum.
offshore,
A few examples of how the portal is being used. Offshore wind, we talked about, obviously, um, being the first time there's been anything like this in the US. There's been a need for a lot of data to make the best decisions. And the government, the agencies are using the portal to help figure out um, where it makes sense and where it doesn't make sense to locate offshore wind infrastructure. You have industries who use it, and you can see when they're submitting, say, public comments on a lot of these proposals, there will be portal links and maps cited and included in their documentation, which we like to see. Submarine cables in this wireless world, I think a lot of people might assume that that is a thing of the past, but the reality is, with internet and the need for high-speed cable connections across the sea to Europe, down to South America, and other places, we actually need it more. And there are a lot of cables being built, high-speed fiber optic billion-dollar projects using the portal to help guide the alignment so that you can steer clear of, in this case with Virginia Beach, key naval training zones, shipwrecks, areas where there's unexploded bombs from World War II that used to be dumped, offshore wind, etc. Bottom tending gear that can get snagged on the line and cause very costly damage. The Coast Guard has been a major user. They, over the last couple of years, have been involved in a project called Port Access Route Studies that basically they're looking at all of the major ports on the East Coast and asking, in light of offshore wind, in light of shipping changes that are projected for the future, infrastructure changes at the ports, how will we need to change our routing measures, our anchorage areas? Where should we have lanes carved out where you can't have any offshore wind or impediments to shipping in the middle of the sea? And the portal has been used to help design some of that and give people in the public a chance to comment and again use it to make their points. And finally, one that we didn't necessarily set out with when the portal was built, education. We've seen it grow in use more and more as a classroom tool, which we love to see. It keeps the pressure on us, I think, to really simplify everything that we do and make sure that it's very easy for any member of the public, whether they be a middle schooler on to a scientist at NOAA, to make sense of it all. And before I jump into the portal itself, Nick, anything you'd want to add to what I've said?
no, nothing to add. Thank you. I appreciate it. We're happy to answer any questions while Carl's flipping over, but that's probably going to happen quickly too. And we have some ideas as like we said, there's 6,000 data sets. They are organized in themes. And we're happy to show anything that might interest you all. We have a few ideas, even from you're talking about corals just a few minutes ago, Bronwyn, of things to show to sort of kick it off. But we're happy to show anything that you might be interested in.
Yeah,
Oh, I would love for you to show things on corals. That would be wonderful.
we'll do. So for those who may not have wrote it down before, this is the homepage of the portal. It's portal.midatlanticocean.org. And if you have another browser open, feel free to go on there and follow along if you like. And before I jump into the map, which we call Marine Planner, I just want to show a few things that might be of use to you. And there's this news page, which basically anytime there is a new important data release or tool upgrade that we have, you can come here to find out what it is, where it came from, how to use it. So if you are a semi-regular user, you can just check out in on this every once in a while to see what's new. The ocean stories are really cool, um, kind of a story map meets digital magazine feature that we have on the portal. And so here's an example of one where Marco was involved with NOAA and some other agencies to do some research on the mid-Atlantic canyons. And you can see up top there is a map feature. And as you scroll down, you start reading the story, and the story and the map will actually change to help tell the story, and the story will explain what you're seeing in the maps. I mentioned that calendar before where you can find if there are portal webinars or meetings coming up in the region of interest to ocean planning and what we do. You can find that here. Um, Also, using the portal here under help, you may a couple of days from now go back on the portal and wonder how did he do something he did or whatever. You can look on here and find a lot of easy features, whether they be short 1 minute videos or text tutorials that will take you through anything you need to know about how to use the portal and its tools. And with that, here is our mapping application, which we call Marine Planner. Now, I mentioned in the beginning those themes, the 14 different categories of data, which you can find here on the left. The first one of them is administrative. And what I'll do is just point out one or two kind of key layers in there or things that I think might be of interest to you. Now, this one, you're more or less talking about a lot of government boundaries. And it's this easy, really. You're just clicking on anything, it'll activate it. You'll start to see those appear here. Once they do, you have some options to change how they look. And it looks like one of them is slowing me down just a bit. Give it a sec. There is a legend that will tell you, obviously, act as a key to what you're seeing there. This active tab, which allows you to close out of things, mute them, reorder them. Wonder why that's taking so long to simplify it. Okay, here's one. National Register of Historic Places. We'll start with those. Okay, so for example, we'll go down to Maryland, scroll down, and as that takes a second to load, I'm sorry, I guess my internet might be a little slow tonight, but for any of these, you can click on the point, it'll give you a pop-up and tell you what you're looking at, a little bit of information on that. And with the active tab, you can slide one down to the bottom. You can change its opacity, make it darker or lighter, or you can hit the X to clear it out. And finally, this little green eye for information icon, you can click on that to give you a short explanation in text about what you see. And excuse me, some options to download the data and look at metadata. Now, we consider ourselves a public information effort and try to, whenever possible, make our data downloadable. There are a handful of exceptions on the portal where there are privacy issues or some other thing along those lines, which prevents us from doing it. Last thing I'll just quickly show on the administrative theme is this Indigenous Nations, Communities, and Cultures collection, which are tribal members in Marco helped guide us in how to put it together and what they'd like to see. There are some pretty cool things here, like the historic native terrestrial territories. And so for each of these, this is developed by an organization that is tribal controlled called Native Land Digital. And they agreed to let us add it to the portal. And you can click on any of these areas to find out, who lived there, and get links to find out more information about it on the Native Land digital website. So we do love having that, and it's just another interesting way of seeing who was around our shores back when, and as well as who is now with current reservations and some of those boundaries. The conservation theme is kind of what it sounds like. Basically, areas along the Mid-Atlantic that are preserved in one way or another, including the Mallows Bay Potomac River National Marine Sanctuary up here, National Park Service boundaries, um, state designated areas, and we are actively trying to add more information to that catalog. Our fishing theme, artificial reefs, is one of the most most activated layers on the portal. And we work with the states to update this all the time, no less than once a year. And you can click on any reef for a pop-up that shows what its name is. Under here, VMS, commercial fishing, vessel monitoring system. You could kind of equate this to like an easy pass that uh, pings the infrastructure and signals where ships are over time. And we take those maps and aggregate them to show where, example, all vessels that were carrying VMS transponders were fishing in 2015 through 19. But underneath that, you can see lots of other time windows and fisheries if you wanted to learn about scallop or squid or surf clam or any other.
Carl, before you move on that one,
Yep,
can you just zoom out in
sure.
a little bit? You can see some really interesting patterns, and I know you probably can't see the chat. We did have a request to
Oh,
look at the mouth of Chesapeake Bay when we can, and if Richard, if you have specific uh, like resources or different activities you want to look at down there, let us know. But we'll keep looking back at the mouth of Chesapeake Bay as well. But it's very interesting to zoom in on these areas and then zoom back out and see the big patterns along the coast, and you can see where the fishing grounds are, and you can see some transit to the fishing grounds as well. Go ahead, Carl. Thank you.
sure. And another very important type of fishing data that we have is this VTR, vessel trip reports, which we also call our communities at sea. So for these, they are by gear type for various date ranges. So let's say pots and traps 2011 through 15. We'll give that a chance to appear. And for these, you can see all of these areas and click on any of them for a pop-up that will tell you which communities essentially relied on that area at sea. Oh, that one drew a blank, but
It popped up. You had it.
did it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's not showing the towns.
It's showing Cape May.
Oh, there we go, Cape May. All
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. Yep.
so maybe that one just didn't. I was unlucky. But you can also click on a port like Ocean City, Maryland, and it will tell you in that time window how many trips emanated from that port, the percentage of the regional total for activity essentially out of that area, the total number of fisher days. So you're getting an interesting economic look at fishing. Nick, anything you'd want to add to fishing before I scoot on? I know that's such an important one.
Nope. If there are questions, maybe we'll come back if folks are specifically interested in the
Sure.
topic.
Okay. Um, we will go on to habitat then. And lots of great data showing essentially, the sea bottom, what's down there, what it looks like. So bathymetry, you can click on some of these to get a sense of, from high resolution sonar and take a look at what's down there. So I will light up our canyons layer 2 to give a better sense of the formations. So Washington Canyon, Norfolk Canyon, Accomack. And you can really get in there, and as it loads, it gives you a very interesting look at just the topography down there. Basically, these areas that were carved out a long time ago by, I guess, during the Ice Age, when all of these rivers actually flowed all the way out there, and the continental shelf was largely a grassy plain. Um, let's see, marine life.
You passed corals.
Oh, is that okay? I thought that was in marine life. I think it's in both actually.
It's in both. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, you know what? That is. Am I crazy? I believe that's in.
There's a modeled one in yeah, they're in both places. There's a modeled one in habitat,
There we go.
and then there's the observed. So you can go back and turn on the modeled one too. You can actually talk about that a little bit.
What I'll do here is change the base map, which will make them pop a little better. So for these, you can look at where there have been observed deep sea corals and click on any of them for a pop-up that will tell you who found them, when they were first reported, what they are. And in that marine life theme, you also see, I know, the World Series of Birding, I heard. We have a lot of great bird data stretching, from essentially Maine right down the whole East Coast. So if you were to go to all avian species relative density, and I will brighten that up a little bit to see where they, are essentially most likely to be found throughout the course of a whole year. But if you scroll down to our marine life library, which has, specific species, I mentioned earlier that we have 6,000 or so data layers. This is about half of them. We have this special widget here just so that it wouldn't be completely unwieldy to have all of those data layers where you can just type in what you're looking for. So that gave you the sense of, for the whole year where all of the bird species, the marine birds are. But let's say you wanted to know where, herring gulls are, and you wanted to know where they are this month in September typically. Well, and from that, you can see a lot of them are up north. And it's a similar thing with marine mammals. We have whale data here. So if you wanted to see all cetaceans, you could do that, or baleen whales. This gives you that kind of key look at their range. But then if you just were interested in finding out about humpbacks and where they might be this month, you could come down here. And once you type in, I believe, 2 letters, it'll start giving you, your options that might match. So September, and you see they're pretty well up and down the East Coast, still largely up in the Gulf of Maine, but they wind up, migrating down south. And if you're to look at the colder months, you'd see some change to that. I'll move on to maritime. So this is a lot of the human use data that we have at sea. We have,
Is there, I saw turtles. Did you
yeah,
is there anything on terrapins?
let me go to our turtle data. So we have here loggerhead, leatherback, Kemp's Ridley, and green turtles, which are kind of the main um, ocean turtles in the mid-Atlantic. And this is an interesting example of what we call one of our data sliders, where sometimes we have this option where you can toggle through manually or just automatically click to animate a map and see how it changes throughout the year. We also have a lot of data showing.
How it toggles through. Is there a way to make that into a little movie and then you can share that with people?
Mm.
Or
I I have you can't record on the portal, but if you have any software, on your computer that will just simply record what you're doing, for example, the Zoom will. Um, I use a system of my own, and then I'll sometimes change them into animated GIFs for social media. But that's an interesting question, and could you export a little video? That would be pretty cool.
Karl, two questions in the chat. The
Sure.
first one was, and actually that map, or whichever one you go to, if you want to go to AIS, that might be a good one actually for
Mhm.
the first question, which is, are there legends that define the color meaning? And the answer is yes. We're flying through trying to give you a flavor of this as best as we can, but Karl will show you the legend on this. Um, so this is basically shipping traffic in the year 2023 for all vessels over 60 feet, and probably a good number of them under the size of 60 feet. And the colors tell you how many transits are coming through that area. And if you click the legend tab with any data set, you'll get um, similar information.
Yeah, so these AIS vessel transit counts, again, electronic tracking that we are just more or less averaging over the course of a year to show this is all vessels that carry AIS, but you can also look at just cargo, and you can see, Baltimore coming in and out of the port, fishing vessels, which will look much different, a lot of interesting patterns offshore. Um, we have passenger vessels like ferries, liners, and then we'll also see a pretty big one for the Chesapeake. I think is the pleasure craft and sailing vessel. Um, this is, I guess, Nick, would you agree that this is a data set within AIS that's gotten a bit better with the years as more people are carrying it?
Yeah. And yeah, it's being required to be carried over time. I think we have over 10 years worth of data, and the last five years, or maybe a little bit more, it's the requirements to carry an AIS and transmit your signal have been increased. But for this, what it won't capture is the smaller boats that don't have to. Many
Hmm.
do, but a lot of recreational vessels are less. Well, most of them are less than 60 feet. And, I know that there are many folks who carry AIS and may even transmit their location. So this is um, capturing some important patterns, but maybe not the full extent of recreational boating and pleasure craft.
Yeah. Gosh, getting a little late, so I'll just speed it up. But there's other great stuff like wrecks and obstructions, historic lighthouses. I find this wrecks layer to be fascinating, where um, you can click on any of them to get a pop-up that will tell you if there is information known about it, and you can really see, especially out by the shelf break, a lot of stuff that's sunk by U-boats, stuff from World War I, World War II. They have a little bit of a story to it. Just got to kind of click through them and find out what it is.
And this might be how we got in contact with Bronwyn related to this, right? We are currently working with many of the aquariums and um, scuba associations and folks who go out and go diving for various purposes to understand where there might be scuba diving hotspots, and a lot of it has to do with wrecks. Not entirely, but I think that's how we ended up in touch with you. I'm not certain, but that is still a work in progress, and it's a good example of using data sets that are pretty good to understand where other activities are happening. Karl, we have another question I'm going to answer real quick
Sure.
too while you're
Go ahead.
thinking about the next thing. So there's also a question about how frequently the data are updated, and it varies. You'll see a lot of these data sets are annual, where we can do like shipping annually. All the jurisdictional boundaries are updated as soon as they change, or any project that comes up that's being proposed, as soon as that hits a public comment period, those come on and they go away after that project has moved on to another phase. For things like fisheries and marine life data, we tend to wait several years so that we can get a batch of data and pool it together to create a map layer that shows patterns. That's especially true for the marine life data, because it takes a long time to get from the research to the data set into a model that we're actually deriving map layers from. So when we show marine life data like birds and sea turtles and whales, we're actually showing a model that is predicting where they're likely to be on that month based on the last 10, 20 plus years of data. So we tend to update those data sets every 3 to 5 years, sometimes more frequently. And similar for fisheries, there's some confidentiality concerns that we don't want to violate any confidentiality agreements or rules. So we tend to wait a couple of years for fisheries data to come in so that we can pull it all together and you won't be able to see where any single vessel or company is fishing.
Down in oceanography, just skipping ahead, that was some historic storm track data, but we have a lot of stuff in here about bottom temperatures, surface temperatures, currents, basically the characteristics of the ocean. We have some recreation data. A lot of this was developed through surveys and interactions with different groups, like this commercial whale and dolphin watch area is one, where we worked with the whale and dolphin watch operators up and down the mid-Atlantic to kind of illustrate where the most important areas to them were. And you can see that. Boat ramps and water trails are another cool collection in there. Renewable energy, very important. Right here, the BOEM active renewable energy leases is the most frequently activated layer on the portal. This gives you the look up and down the coast of where there are different areas that currently have leases by developers for eventual development. One that is under planning or discussion, I should say, right now, that you may have or may not have heard of, the Central Atlantic 2 call area, which is active. So essentially with a call process, they're casting a very wide net in the beginning all over the coast and asking people to just get in touch with BOEM and tell them which of these areas really do you think offshore wind would be good, or it's important that we keep it out. And they wind up whittling that down into some large but much smaller areas than what you're seeing here, and eventually move ahead with leases or don't. But we also have a lot of data showing where the turbines will be or are, all the infrastructure that's proposed, anything basically that is public information that we can release at this time, we do. And security, this is a lot of declassified naval data, stuff like the danger zones, so areas where there are restrictions of some kind or another for civilians, areas where there's unexploded bombs, ordnance, including zones that were used for that or are active. Socioeconomic data, a lot of maps here showing essentially which areas and industries are directly reliant on the ocean. So you can click on any of these coastal counties and get a pop-up that tells you this was based on census data, the amount of wages that were directly dependent on the ocean, the amount of number of businesses, jobs. Moving on to our final one, water quality, which, as it sounds, has some interesting information as regards, um, the health of the water and where there's activities that might be impactful for that. So, for example, here I have the wastewater outfalls and discharge flow. So all of these areas are where there's pipes where something is getting pumped out to sea, whether it be sewerage or power plant, and it'll tell you some more information about that. The EPA attains layer kind of tells you the health of that water body, and you can click on it for a report card at the EPA that will tell you more information. Let's see. And any questions coming in, Nick, while that's loading? Anything else?
Yeah, yeah.
That was the last
This,
of the anyway.
yeah, there's a question about how the rights to the data and can it be used by anyone? Yes, it can be used by anyone, and that's we have with all of the data providers, they know exactly what we're doing, and even have some agreements with some of them where we're using some data sets that have some confidentiality to them, and we're obscuring any confidential information so that these data sets can be used to see these patterns. So it can be used, and it gets used a lot. It's been used by the media, in addition to all the what Karl and I introduced earlier in terms of members of the public who are participating in a management or permitting process. If they want to say, hey, that's a really important location for fishing or for humpback whales, and here are the maps to show that. That's kind of why we created it. And it's also been, as Karl said, in educational venues and in the media to sort of explain some of these offshore issues that are maybe higher profile.
Sort of related to that question, I will just quickly mention that you do not need to be a registered portal user to do anything that I just showed you. I was actually logged out, but for those who do, and all you need is just an email, it does unlock some tools that you can find here in My Planner, like the ability to create bookmarks. So if you work on a map, you create it, you can save it or share it. Just go in here and anytime just click on any of these ones and it'll recreate it right down to the zoom level for you. Also, we have this shapes tool, which allows you to create drawings, draw points, lines, highlight areas that might be important. And finally, this user imported layer. So if there's some other map data out there that doesn't even have to be ocean related. If you wanted to bring it into the portal, if you have the URL for the service, you can just essentially drop that in and make it appear on the portal. Yeah, so let's open it up for questions of any kind if they haven't come in.
Well, first of all, I'm blown away by this tool and all of the data that's available to us all. This is it's amazing. Does anybody have any questions? I have one. Is there anything similar to this? Is for terrestrial area, not the coastal areas? I mean, is this a for other areas?
That's a great question. It's interesting because when I mentioned my background was land use planning, I started working on ocean issues about 15 years ago. And at the time, there were more websites like this, and there wasn't anything really like this for the ocean. There was a lot of data, but it wasn't summarized in this way. Since I've been working on the ocean, I haven't paid as great attention to what's going on in terms of terrestrial systems. But in the last 5 years, the technology has evolved so much that there are now many map portals out there that are very issue specific. So my guess is that there are many of them for whatever issue you might be interested in. Whether there's something like this that brings everything together, I'm not certain. There used to be, and they were using different technology, and the states sometimes each have them for their own. You might be able to find one. I'm not even sure if there's a Maryland state portal, but my guess is the answer is yes, in terms of looking onshore versus offshore. There sometimes even towns have them now, just to show parcels with respect to various natural resources. So it depends on what you're looking for. My guess is, if you have an interest, you could probably find a mapping portal for it at this point.
There are so many sites that are GIS sites and tools that are specialized for limited things. And one thing that we have done is really look around and, um, you know, brought in data from some of those sites that make sense for the portal. And a lot of that is our users telling us that they want that and could use it. And, here's an example. This actually came from a Maryland GIS tool, which just the name escapes me. Let's see if it's on click, but for our water trails collection. And actually, you can click on that. And it'll tell you more. Gosh, I forget the name of this. Maybe one of you knows it, but a lot of the states have really great data. And sometimes we can just synthesize it and make broader regional products or collections that bring it all together.
I've seen some good ones for the Chesapeake Bay too. The Chesapeake Bay program has a good one. And I don't know how far up in the watershed they go, but my guess is they go significantly into the watershed.
And shoot, I just forgot my my question. Anybody else have oh, here we go. Richard has another question while I'm thinking.
Yeah, I see two other questions. We'll do the easier one first. Is there a printout feature or a screen capture feature?
What we have
Yeah,
for that is this print export button. And what that will do if you use the paper print is essentially create a version of it, or you can use it to export a PDF at a resolution of your choice that will include the legends and all of that on there. You know, I tend to just take the easy way out a lot of times and use my clipping tool and just do a screen quick capture when I need something, just quick and easy. But we do provide that.
Did you go over the share tool as well, the bookmark?
So that, oh, that to share this map,
Yeah.
you can click that to get a short URL, or if you have your own websites, it does have an embed code if you wanted to put like a small version of a portal map in there, kind of the way a restaurant would with directions to, you know, their site or something like that, where it's interactive and movable and pretty cool. Yeah, there's a couple of tools up here, a linear measurement tool if you wanted to just find out, you know, how far it is from point A to point B in miles, kilometers, knots, an area measurement tool, and then the shapes and external layers, shortcuts for that.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the question that I skipped because I needed a minute to think about it. Um, so the question is it possible to see changes in the bay oceans due to weather, both immediate, such as storms, and with climate change? So we're focused on really snapshots and change over time. We don't have anything that's near real time. You won't be able to see any impacts of storms. In terms of climate change, there are oceanographic data in there that has a time series, so you can see changes over time. You can see even at the fisheries data with some of the fisheries data how fisheries have changed over time. Some of it's a lot of factors there, but climate change could be one of them. You can see how we're actually about to add a data layer that will show change over time for right whale and humpback whale distributions, which again, there are many factors there, but changes to uh, climate is also likely a big contributor there.
Yeah, we should probably give a plug to the Maracus ocean map too, which you can go to find real-time data of oceanographic conditions, tides, you know, wave heights, sea temperatures, all of that stuff in real time. And they've been a great partner to us. We sometimes we work with them to take that real time data that they show and collect and create some products like this, which just have the averages for bottom temperatures over the, you know, each month, just to give people that more of a long range planning tool this is than real time.
The last question I see here, has this been used to target areas for marine protection, to protect particular species? We could talk about that. To improve fish catch or attract tourists? I have not seen anyone using it to attract tourists that I know of. I'm trying to think of that one. In terms of improving fish catch, I don't think so. The fishing community would more likely use it to show areas where generally there's important fishing ongoing, and that they would prefer that new activities not be interrupting the important fishing grounds. I have seen, because we deal with a lot of the ports, I have seen where I put up the AIS data and gone by vessel type, and you'll see that it's a very competitive market, and you'll see how different vessels are carrying different product. They kind of know what's on different vessel types better than I do, and so I have been with one port director where he was poking around looking at all the changes over time with some of the vessels coming into specific ports and linking it up with what kinds of business they were likely attracting. And So we've seen that. Karl, you could probably talk about marine protection.
Yeah,
Um,
a couple things. You know what? Let me find the Frank R. Lautenberg Deep Sea Coral Protection Area, which is a couple of years old. The portal was pretty influential in helping guide this process and working with people in the fishing industry and conservationists to develop these areas that would be, off limits to bottom tending gear to protect corals and marine life that really take hundreds of years to develop down there and could be ended very quickly with, some gear striking it. I would also mention one going on right now, the Hudson Canyon Marine Sanctuary nomination. Um, this is something that is being considered at the federal level right now, and there are still public hearings happening on it. And I know that the portal is being used by the team involved with that to help, uh, possibly shape that area a bit or learn more about the the general area and the places that might be designated as part of the canyon because it's a really vast one. I have it highlighted here, but even you can see how it goes further and further. It's a major canyon.
What is the most unique way or surprising way that somebody or an organization has used the portal and the data that you provided?
that's a good one. Um, I'm trying to think of all through all of our uses. So there is an example of this is actually up off of Rhode Island, so it's the Northeast, but we all work together. This is a cool one where they used it. The U.S. Navy does a lot of testing of autonomous underwater vessels, and they were looking for a location that didn't have a lot of recreational traffic. So they recreational and commercial traffic, so that they could do testing. That was pretty interesting. There's been some use around um, identifying anchorage locations for large vessels, very large vessels. I don't know that that's all that unique because there's a lot of maritime use of the portal, but that's another interesting one. Uh, there's Karl mentioned educational. That has been kind of surprising. We've seen it used in all different classes, grade levels. We've seen it. I've spent a lot of time with students that are either undergraduate or graduate students that are using it to inform their project or their thesis. Maybe not so unique, but interesting. I'm trying to think of others.
Tying to that educational one, there was once I love this story. I do once a year these basically just like this a demo for teachers who are taking a professional development class at the New York Aquarium. And one of them in Staten Island took it back to their class and really just started doing some very cool things with it. And I came to find out later that as a class project for three different groups of sixth graders, they all um, came up with essays to nominate or come out against the Hudson Canyon nomination, and they delivered them to the congresswoman in that district. And I think they wound up inviting people from that office to come and they all gave a presentation to her, and I love to hear that. I'm also just very intrigued sometimes when I'll see like just local, ordinary recreational fishing people who are using, um, some of the bathymetry data to really look at like the nooks and crannies off our shore and try and discover new spots with it. Um, you don't always hear the different ways people are using it, but it fascinates me for sure.
And I know that y'all mentioned that you have the groups all across the United States in the coastal areas. Are there any similar initiatives internationally that you work with?
There's a in the UK. There's a similar type application that uh, we've learned from, and that's the one that I'm thinking of is specifically related to offshore wind development out there and how they're taking a lot of the research that's being collected and making it available to users. They've had offshore wind farms for 30 years there, almost 30 years, might be more than 30 years. I'm not sure exactly. 20, at least 20 anyway. And that's a good example. We've learned from them. There's one in Canada for that borders the area that borders Maine, essentially the part of the Gulf of Maine that is Canadian north to the Canadian Maritimes that we've collaborated with some as well. There's not international. There's some similar type efforts though to the south of the region we're looking at too. There's one in the
One that,
Caribbean.
one that comes to mind for me too, Nick, is Eurogoose, which a few years ago they were actually more interested in our public outreach using the portal than as much as the mapping or anything like that themselves. Um, and at the time we were using it. There was a development of this Mid-Atlantic Ocean Action Plan, and the Northeast did one as well. And I would set up tables at every public meeting and use the portal to help show people what's out there and what's going on. And they were pretty interested in that. And I wonder if they used it at all when they brought it back to Europe. But um, they wound up giving us like some kind of a best practices designation and writing about it.
All right. Are there any other questions for Nick or Karl? Well, thank you guys. This is amazing. It's an amazing tool, and I think that I'm going to switch from scrolling through Instagram and YouTube, and I'm going to be spending a lot more time scrolling through these maps and this data. This is better use of my screen time for personal screen time. I know that I can't wait to get into it and see what I can discover. But
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, and keep us updated on any new developments. But and if you're in the Baltimore area, come and visit us.
Yeah, of course. I was just looking on a map exactly. You told me before we got on where you are, and I know where you are. So that's great.
Yep. But right now we have the woolly mammoth, and we're at the Ice Age in Maryland with the woolly mammoth. So that get here before March, you can see the woolly mammoth.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thanks for all the great questions. And feel free to reach out if you have other questions. And we do, Karl does a lot more of these than I do, but we do trainings and presentations like this all the time. So if you, and we're happy to answer questions. There's a lot of data there, and it's sometimes you might not be able to, we can help you find things if you have a question.
Well, I mean, is there any point where there's just too much data? Can there ever be too much data?
We ask that all the time. When we started out, I think we had like 100 data sets, and I don't know. It can be a lot to manage, and we might be nearing that place because we want to make sure it's all documented the right way, and there's a lot of relationships with the people who collect the data to make sure that we are documenting everything. So, we flew through a lot of this stuff so we could show you as much as possible. But if you start to look at some of the documentation, it talks about what's in the map but maybe what's not in the map. So, there are things occasionally we have to do where we're not going to suggest we have every every piece of information about humpback whales. There's other places to go to get additional information. And, when you're looking at that map, the documentation's really important for how to interpret it. And that part of it becomes a lot of work in terms of how much we can manage. So we might be getting close.
Well, we'll everybody stay well, stay curious, stay outside, or stay in the portal. Go into the portal and see what you can find and discover. So that's your homework for this week until we meet again. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.